is good to see you guys. Thank you for coming out on a, what is it, Friday night?
Yeah.
There's so many things y'all could be doing, so many other places you could be that are far more fun than listening to me talk. So thank you for coming, and it really is humbling that Tony and Carrie would open up their home and folks would work, and then you would just come and hang out and just spend some time. I know that the brain can't absorb more than the seat can endure, so I'm going to talk fast. And I'm thankful for what you guys stand for, what you believe in. I'm thankful for the state of Texas. And I truly believe that God has blessed Texas. And you know, we've said all of our lives that, you know, we've used the phrase God bless Texas. And I think that if we say that enough times over the course of our adult life, sometimes we forget the meaning of that. The realization, the acknowledgement, and it's sacred, that God didn't just wind us up and turn us loose into history, but He's actively put His hand in providence on our history and our journey and the legacy of this state. We've got a great, rich history and a great identity. And the beauty of Texas is we know who we are. And I always tell people wherever I go, I say, you know, the thing about Texas is it has a spirit, and the spirit of Texas is caught, it's not taught. You can talk about it with somebody till they're blue in the face, but they don't necessarily get the spirit of Texas. You know, I remember when I was a kid, I'd go to the mall, and they'd have those kiosks set up out there, and they would have those paintings with just all the colors and the squiggly lines, and if you stared at it kind of cross-eyed and kind of looked through the picture, an image would begin to emerge. You remember that? And you either saw it or you didn't see it. But once you saw it, you could see it forever. And I say, that's kind of like Texas. Some people just don't get it. You know, they don't understand what the fuss is about. And I like to say, and again, I grew up in the state of Georgia. I've been living here in Texas for the last 21 years. I'm a pro-life guy. I believe life begins at fertilization and conception. And I will say I was conceived in Dallas. So I at least have Texas DNA, all right? I'm a Seminole Texan. How about that? But I grew up in the state of Georgia. A lot of similarities with the personality of Georgia, which is the Empire State of the South, and a lot of business and economy there. And the attitude of Texas. I always say that Texas, we kind of have a humble arrogance. We walk a little bit taller, hold our heads a little bit higher, our chest is stuck out. You know, everything's bigger in Texas. And I've got friends, I spent the better part of 15 years in and out of third world countries doing mission work, humanitarian aid work, medical work. And I have a lot of friends from around the world, and they'll come and visit. And they'll say, I can't wait to go back home and tell people I came to Texas. And I say, does it not matter that you came to America? They said, no, America doesn't matter. Texas is what matters. And I began to realize the legacy and the reputation that we have. But I'm concerned. And the reason we're here tonight, and the reason I'm doing what I'm doing, and this is not a publicity ploy, I promise you that. When you run for office, and these gentlemen and these ladies that are running for office that are here tonight, they'll tell you this is not the kind of publicity you want. You don't want people dumping on you for the whole time you're campaigning and, you know, digging everything through your closet. Of course, people always ask me this, are you worried about the skeletons in your closet? I said, I burned the closet down a long time ago. My skeletons are like Halloween decorations just out on the front lawn for everybody to see. And I'm what they call a reluctant candidate. I didn't want to do this. I certainly don't believe in career politicians. And back in July 2020, I was in South Dakota, and it was July 2nd. We were waiting on President Trump to come speak at Mount Rushmore the following night. And I'm having dinner there at the Summer White House, Calvin Coolidge's Summer White House there in the Black Hills of South Dakota. We're at a dinner there. And we're there. Don Trump Jr. was at the dinner, and we're just hanging out. We're spending time together, drinking a little wine. I was, at least. And my phone goes off, and it was a news notification that said that the governor of Texas was deeming certain businesses and individuals non-essential, again, and shutting down certain aspects of the state with mandates. And I don't know if it was because I was drinking the wine or I was sitting with a Trump, but I decided to go to Twitter. And I tweeted that I was going to run for governor in 2022 for the state of Texas. Went to bed that night, woke up to an interesting barrage of messages from people. And I've been fortunate enough over the years to grow quite a big social media following. I've always run my mouth. And I've always said that I'll talk to anybody that'll stand still or walk slow. I'm a person of conviction. I have a lot of beliefs. My foot fits very easily into my mouth. And I don't always agree with the things that I say. But I realized that something had to be done. Because if you look over the last 18 months, this governor has violated your constitutional rights about 14 times. I'm actually counting 17 at this point. 14, 15 times your constitutional rights have been violated in the last 18 months. There's a problem with that. I don't take lightly to my liberties being trampled on. And right now, everybody's liberties, we're feeling that pressure. We saw with the Supreme Court decision yesterday as far as the vaccine mandates for employers. I don't even like that judgment because it still gives those federally funded organizations and entities the ability to mandate vaccines. So that's our healthcare workers, that's law enforcement, that's first responders, and so on down the line. I don't like that. I don't think that a person should have to have a medical procedure in order to keep a job. You know, I was riding down the street and I saw a sign that said, "Not all heroes wear capes," and it was a picture of medical professionals. And I said, well, apparently not all heroes get to keep their jobs in the state either. Something's got to change with that. I don't like this. Texas Tribune called Greg Abbott the most powerful governor in the history of the state. And the reason they said that, and the Tribune is a rag, but they were right in this, they said that it's because he's continually bypassing the legislative process. He does what he wants to do unilaterally and dictatorially. When he shut down the state last year, that was an example of that. That can't happen like this. That's not how we're run. That's not how we became great. And as I said earlier, where God has brought us along in His providence, it's almost like we've looked at God and said, you know, you brought us this far, now we're going to thumb our nose at you and we'll take it from here. And whenever you start putting men and women up on a pedestal to rule over you, tyranny reigns, and that's not a good thing, especially for people who love liberty. And my neck's getting a little bit sore from bending over and having somebody put their boot on my neck. And we're under all these different tyrannies, whether it's the big government of Washington, D.C. or Austin, or perhaps it's this medical tyranny or the corporate tyranny, the judicial tyranny, the educational tyranny, and so on and so forth. Big tech, the mainstream media, all of these are tyrannies that we're feeling. And everybody feels that there's no recourse. What can we do? Well, I know this governor's not doing anything. He talks a good game. He's spending about $25,000 a week on polls to tell him how to govern. I'd much rather have somebody with a backbone that knows what to do, can feel the winds of leadership change, and know the direction that he needs to take the people that he's leading. A great preacher from last century said that it's possible for the person that's leading a group of people to get so far out in front of them that that group of people perceives him as the enemy. And I think we're starting to perceive our delegated authority, or our delegated representatives, those that we've given authority over our lives, we're starting to perceive them as the enemy. And quite frankly, that's what they're becoming. Folks, this has got to change. And so when I jumped into this, I jumped in with one mission and one mission alone, and that is, let's get government out of our lives. When I woke up on September 1st, there were 666 new laws in Texas. That's an interesting number. I didn't go to bed on September, whatever the last day of September was. 30th, is that right? Never could get that right. I didn't go to bed that night thinking, man, I hope there's 600 some odd laws in my life tomorrow. I want less laws. I want less regulations. I want more freedom. I want all the freedom we can get. I don't want a guy who's sitting there in Austin, Texas, who's putting his finger up in the wind to see which way the political opinions and the polls are taking it. I don't want a guy who's watching the news to see what Ron DeSantis in Florida is saying, and then 5 days later turn around saying the same thing but not doing anything about it. So everywhere I go, I'm telling people, I said, read the fine print. Don't read the headlines. Don't listen to the soundbite. Don't look at the R or the D that's in bold print next to the name. Read the fine print. So when Greg went on with Tucker Carlson the other day, and he said, we're building the wall. It's not building a wall. He got a 1.7 miles of private property deeded to him to put up some wall panels so it would look good on the news. That's the fine print. Whenever he talks about signing an executive order to make sure that vaccine mandates are not going to be allowed in Texas, that's rubbish. It's not worth the paper that it's written on. You've got to pass that through a legislative process, and as we were talking earlier, you got to have legislation that actually has teeth on it to make sure that we penalize these companies that are going to try to enforce these mandates. We got to stop these things. But we got to have somebody that's willing to stand up and do it, regardless of public opinion. You know, whenever these House Democrats took off, they didn't want to deal with election integrity there during the first legislative session, and they went to Washington, D.C. and hid under Nancy Pelosi's skirt. People say, what would you have done about that? Well, I'll tell you what I would have done. I would have fired every one of them. We'd have cleaned house on that. We'd have fired their staff, stripped them of any responsibilities with any committees. You'd have seen me on the news on my hands and knees with a Black & Decker screwdriver changing the locks on their office doors. We'd have taken their chairs off the House floor and taken them out there on Congress and set a bonfire. You say, you can't do that. Watch me. At some point in time, you got to roll some heads. This government has gotten so big in Texas that it rolls through like a giant blob, and everything it touches, it just consumes more stuff, and it gets bigger and rolls on and leaves people like you and me in its wake. So it's going to take people that have some skin in the game, who are feeling the heat, who are willing to step up and say, that's enough. So I put my money where my mouth was. I said, I'm going to use my platform. I'm going to use my voice. I'm going to use whatever influence and reach that I have to run for governor. And if nothing else, folks, and listen, I'll be honest with you, statistically, it is impossible in the United States to unseat an incumbent governor when the overwhelming media perception of the guy is that he's doing a good job. Statistically impossible to unseat a guy like that. But I'll tell you one thing, we're holding his feet to the fire in a very big way. And all of this conservative veneer that you're starting to hear conversationally come out of him on the news and the headlines is because of what we're doing. Now, we've got to continue this pressure or we're in trouble, because I truly believe that we're about 4 to 6 years before Texas starts to look like California. Just like it. We already have a problem. I was with a newspaper reporter in Brenham a few months ago, and she asked me, she said, if you make it to Austin, do you think that you can handle it, since Austin is not like the rest of Texas? I said, that's a very telling question. That's the problem, isn't it? Austin's not like the rest of Texas. That's got to change. You see, we have Austin, which we know is a very blue hub. They said they want to keep Austin weird. When 20% of the population of Austin lives under a bridge by choice, that's weird. But you've got Dallas, you've got, unfortunately, where I live, Fort Worth, which now for 2 terms have voted blue. I still think it's a conservative place. They just have a Venezuelan who's a lefty progressive who's counting the votes. But you've got San Antonio, you've got El Paso, you've got Harris County, you've got Houston. So these are very blue places. I call them the blueberries that are in the chili. We've got to stop this, because at this stage of the game, and I believe in proposing, there needs to be legislation that says if you're going to add an amendment to the Constitution of Texas, that it needs to be ratified by 75% of the counties in the state. So I was in Lamar County last night there in Paris, Texas. That gives Lamar the same say in the way the future of Texas goes as Harris County. That's what we've got to do. It's where our country runs. That's what the Electoral College is for. This can't be about mob rule. We've got to make sure that that's represented even here in the state of Texas. So, folks, I'm encouraged by what I find as I travel across the state, because I see that spirit of Texas alive in people. There's a fighting spirit that's there. And people say, well, I hear it all the time. They say, a guy like Prather, he can't win. But I remind everybody, I said, whenever we won our independence from Mexico, we didn't have a lot of fighting men. In fact, since 1800, Texas has never mustered more than 1,000 fighting men, and with less than 1,000 people, we won our independence, we became a nation, we became a republic. We liberated ourselves from the most powerful nation on the earth at that point in time, which was a superpower under Santa Anna. Anything is possible by the grace of God. And I've been running this thing the best I know how. We don't have any big donors. We don't have any multinational corporations. We don't have any big pharma, any big clinics. Unlike Greg Abbott, who I've seen his donor rolls, and it would upset you very much to know some of the names that are on it. Guys like George Soros. And that money's not being returned, folks. We know that big tech in Silicon Valley, he's thrown the doors wide open. Austin is becoming a Silicon Valley. We're the number 2 largest subsidizer of Facebook in the nation. Somewhere around $165, $170 million, we give your taxpayer money. We give it to Facebook every year. Can you believe that? Tesla has made a headquarters here. Facebook is in the process of putting an Austin headquarters here. We know that Google's here, Amazon's here. They bring with them their ideologies, they bring their influence, and they bring their money. Folks, their ideologies are not the same as yours. And we're throwing the doors open to them. We just gave up. What is the super chip, Jeremy, for the South Korean super chip company, the big one? Samsung. For the life of me, I couldn't think of that. Samsung. Greg Abbott just gave Samsung a $795 million tax break to move to Texas. You know who's going to pick up that bill? You are. They don't have to pay almost $1 billion in taxes in order to come here and do business. And you say, well, that's more jobs for Texans. But is it? Because let me tell you, when Google comes here and Amazon comes here and you say you go to work for them and they say, okay, you got to get juiced and boosted. You got to get vaccinated. That's why our mandate if you're going to work for us. And you say, no, I'm not going to do that. They're going to fire you and they're going to call their cronies in Silicon Valley who are already indoctrinated and inoculated to come over here and take that job instead of a Texan. That's what's going to happen across the board. Under Greg Abbott, we've seen a $48 billion increase in spending statewide in the last 7 years. Spending under Greg Abbott has increased by 19.5%, while population growth has only grown by 5.5%. That means government spending is far more expansive than our population growth to sustain it. This is big government. This is what I mean when I say we're starting to look like California. California is dead in the water. They'll never come back. They can't make it back. There's no possible way. It'll take generations before California ever looks once again like the land of Reagan. But what's going to happen when Texas falls? Because here's the thing. The rest of the nation looks to Texas. They believe in the identity of Texas. They believe that we are a rock that they can anchor their sense of liberty to, and that Texas is going to be immovable. But we're not. We're in trouble. That's why Washington, D.C. has a target on our back right now. When you turn on the television, you don't see the southern border of New Mexico, Arizona, or California. Where do you see it? Texas. You see Del Rio, you see Eagle Pass. 121 miles. Val Verde County borders with Mexico. Across the river and across Lake Amistad is Acuna. The cartels in Acuna are making $25 million a week in human trafficking, organ harvesting, fentanyl, opiates that are coming across the river, sex trafficking. This is bad. In some parts along the border, the cartels are making $14 million a day. And we're not doing anything to stop it. The Biden administration is not going to do anything to stop it because they want Texas to fall. They want us weak, they want us in shambles, and they want us to become like California. You don't feel unified with California. You don't feel unified with Illinois. You don't feel unified with New York. We're standing alone, quite honestly, because we're the last big one on the block. And I have people all the time that say, man, why couldn't Texas, when it came to the shutdowns and the quarantines and the masking and the social distancing, why couldn't Texas be more like Kristi Noem, the governor of South Dakota, and not shut down? Why couldn't we be more like Ron DeSantis over in Florida? And Ron's got a tough talk, right? He doesn't do everything he says he's doing, but he's doing a lot. Certainly more than this governor's doing in Texas. And I tell people, I say, I don't want to be South Dakota. South Dakota doesn't have its own toast. I don't want to be Florida. There's no waffle irons in the shape of Florida. You can't tell me what the flag of South Dakota looks like. We take our flag and turn it into women's bikinis and float the river every year. We know what the Lone Star looks like. Texas women are far too pretty to be masked up. But what are we doing? We're following suit. The Biden administration loves it. First of all, Joe Biden, President Sippy Cup, he needs an instruction manual to chew pudding, right? The guy's not there. Kamala Harris, she's an idiot. We know that. And what have we got? We keep giving all this attention to these political morons who don't know anything. You know, so now you got Bobby O'Rourke who's going to run. He's going to pull the trifecta of losing once again. You know, he's lost for the Senate. He's lost for running for president. And now he's going to lose as he runs for governor. But we can't take that for granted, right? Because they're going to spend $90 to $100 million to try to get that idiot elected in this state. We can't let that happen. This is a dangerous time we're living in, and I want you to know that the left, they want to run against Greg Abbott. Because Greg Abbott does not have a defensible record. He can't defend it. That's why the mainstream media talks about him being such a great conservative. They want the people of Texas to believe that. So that the uninformed, uneducated voter who shows up at the ballot box on March 1st will vote Greg Abbott out of name recognition. And name recognition is important. And you're going to see that when you go to vote on March 1st, because there's a Rick Perry on the ballot. Not the Rick Perry, but one of the campaigns, you see his orange signs all over town, paid for a guy out of Springtown, Texas, to be on the ballot named Rick Perry. And the crazy thing is, Rick Perry is out polling Don Huffines. And I like to give Don a hard time about that. I do it to his face. I just pick Don up, put him right in my pocket, and give him a hard time. He's cute. I drive down the street sometimes, and I feel like the Lord's looking down over my shoulder, and it's just Don on a billboard. He's everywhere. I'm glad those guys are running. I like Don. I like Alan. I've known Alan for a lot of years. We disagree on some things. We come at things from a different angle. But I'm glad they're running. I wish there were a dozen more people on the primary ballot, because that helps bring Abbott's percentage lower and potentially gets him into a runoff if he doesn't lose outright. So, folks, we're going to see what happens. We really are. I'm politically incorrect. I like being politically incorrect. When I say Texas is not the Texas that most Texans think it is anymore, I mean that. I don't believe that you can solve the complex problems that we have in this state and still be politically correct. It's going to take some wild-eyed solutions, some head rolling, quite honestly. When I say get government out of your life, that means there's some agencies that need to be eradicated. There's some people that need to go away. There's a lot of money that needs to be saved. Spending needs to be cut. We need to take about 24 head rollers in there and almost to a mafia style just start getting rid of people. Finding a way to bury the bodies where they'll never be found again. It's a train station. Our founding fathers, if they knew what was going on, not only in our country, but in our state, our founding fathers are rolling over in their graves. To know that the cartels are shooting across that river at our men and women every morning, and they don't have the ability or the right to fire back, do you think our founding fathers would shoot back? Do you understand that they went into a revolution with the greatest might and power on the planet over a 3% tax? We're ranked 6th in the nation in terms of property taxes. This is insane. The stuff we're putting up with, the things that we're saying are okay. Do you know what? I want to bring this up because I was just talking about it. Anybody here know what an operational fund transfer is? It's the #1 budget item in the state of Texas every 2 years. It's the biggest expenditure, operational fund transfers. You'd think we would know what that is. It's $124 billion every 2 years. Now, our budget has to be balanced constitutionally, and we have to have a balanced budget in the state of Texas. We spend $124 billion every 2 years on something called operational